Hi, I'm Pat Castellano. I am a member of the League of Women Voters of Duluth and trained as a moderator for the League of Women Voters. I have the pleasure of moderating this forum. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Duluth, I'd like to welcome everyone. The forum will be presented on PACT-TV and linked to the League of Women Voters of Duluth website, so feel free to share the forum with others. The League of Women Voters is pleased to present this General Issues Forum for the state representative candidates of District 8A and 8B, so thank you for being here and your willingness to participate not only in government but also forums like this because it's important. The League of Women Voters believes that an informed citizenry is a foundation of effective democracy. The League is open to membership for men and women who are interested in nonpartisan civil participation. The League of Women Voters of Duluth realizes that creative and innovative policies and practices are forged out of diverse points of view. We believe diverse perspectives are necessary for responsible and representative decision making. So let's acknowledge our commitment to welcome and facilitate diversity, equity, and inclusion in all aspects of our work. We strive to include people from a mix of abilities and backgrounds in all of our activities. And you're invited to join us. Viewers, too, for more information, you can check out our website, www.lwvduluth.org. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan volunteer organization that works with local, state, and national levels to encourage citizens to participate in government. While we as a league do study and take stands on issues, we don't endorse or support participating parties, political parties, or candidates. The views expressed at this forum are those of the candidates and not those of the League of Women Voters of Duluth. Additionally, LWV Duluth's sponsorship of this forum is not a league endorsement of any of the individual candidates participating. And please remember to exercise your right to vote on Tuesday, August 9th, 2022. Now let's introduce the candidates. The candidates for State Representative District 8A are Art Johnson, Alan Kerr, Liz Olson. Liz will not be able to be here for the forum, but she's submitted an empty chair statement, which I'll read during the opening statements. The candidates for State Representative District 8B are Eric Forsman, Becky Hall, and Alicia Kozlowski. So welcome. Our forum will begin with candidates giving a 2-minute opening statement followed by the questioning round. Questions have been vetted by the League of Women Voters of Duluth committees. Candidates were not given the questions in advance, and each candidate will be given 1.5 minutes to provide their response. The questioning round has been set up so that you'll be asked questions in a rotating order, so not everyone will start. You may start one, and then you may end one and start the next one. The order in which you will respond was determined at random, and we'll rotate the responses throughout the forum. After the questioning round is completed, you'll be given time for a 2-minute closing statement prior to the end of the forum. And now the candidates can provide their opening statements, but I'll begin by reading Liz Olson's empty chair statement, if you don't mind. This is from candidate Olson. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting the candidate forum today. The work of the League of Women Voters is critical in educating and informing voters each election cycle. I greatly value these efforts and apologize I was not able to be there in person. I am Liz Olson, and I'm running to represent District 8A in the Minnesota House of Representatives. I have served our community for the last 6 years in the legislature, and it would be my honor to continue in this role. I've been able to work with our community to secure critical infrastructure funding, fight the opioid epidemic, and give thanks to frontline workers with hero pay. I work to build relationships within our community and at the Capitol to get things done to meet the needs of Minnesotans. For more information and to get in touch with me, you can visit www.lizforduluth.com. Again, thanks to the League of Women Voters and all those tuning in to educate themselves ahead of the election on Actually, it should be August 9th, primary election. I'll be honored to earn your support. Thank you. And opening statements, we'll begin with Becky Hall. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Becky Hall. After living the rat race in the Twin Cities and serving our country in the U.S. military, my husband Pat and I thought our dream came true when we brought our young family to Duluth to settle for the rest of our lives here. Here I am, 20 years later, 5 kids all grown up, off living their lives, and they thank us every day for bringing them to Duluth, where they have had such wonderful memories of growing up here. This is an amazing and beautiful community. In those 20 years, while I was raising those kids, I was also very active in the community, kind of my way of doing my part to contribute positively to this home I call Duluth. Prior to settling down here, I worked in economic development for the state of Minnesota, and I worked at the legislature. I think about my time at the legislature, and although I lived in the Twin Cities, I had a very interesting connection with Duluth. I worked very closely with Republican Senator Jim Gustafson on several legislative proposals, one in particular related to local government aid. That was 30 years ago. That was the last time Duluth had any sort of leadership from our party represented at the Capitol on its behalf. Fast forward to today. After decades of Democrat Party stranglehold on Duluth, look what we have. Gas prices through the roof, skyrocketing inflation, our retirement savings disappearing right before our eyes, energy prices hitting an all-time high, empty shelves at the grocery stores, shuttered small businesses, increased crime, and a mental health crisis that's harming our children. Duluth deserves more than what the Democrat Party can offer it. Their policies are harming our families and our community. It's time to turn this ship around before it sinks and elect a new kind of leadership outside the Democrat Party. I ask you to put your trust in me, Becky Hall, as your next representative at the Capitol, and I look forward to answering your questions today. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Hall. And next will be Candidate Kozlowski.
Great. Hi, I'm Alicia Kozlowski, and I'm a proud lifelong DFLer and your DFL endorsed candidate. And I'm running for the community I was born and raised in. A voice like mine has never represented District 8B here in Masabe Kong, the place of the giants, which we also now know as Duluth. I was born to a Mexican father who worked as a union electrician and an Ojibwe mother who spent most of her life working as a daycare provider and housekeeper. Growing up, we struggled like too many working class families do with poverty, surfing from couch to couch, and hustling on public assistance. My grandmother also raised me on a pension that she earned as a para in 25 years for the Duluth Public Schools, where she worked with my Auntie Ruth Myers and Marjorie Wilkins advocating at the statewide level. You'd recognize them today in Myers-Wilkins Elementary School. I'm here with a generational commitment to breaking down barriers for the people of Duluth. It's on the shoulders of these giants that I stand as a cycle breaker who knows the deepest strengths of our community. I'm a first-gen grad from UMD who went on to earn an MBA from St. Scholastica. I live now with my family, my partner Samantha, and my daughter Kat in Hunters Park. I'm here as a dealer of hope, from running the streets to being a business developer to a higher educator and now working to run the city of Duluth on the city's leadership team. I'm here because this is a really important race for an open seat where there is no incumbent. It's about putting people in, not about putting people in positions of power, but about putting power in the hands of the people. It's a really clear choice that voters have to make for our district. Now is not a time to play small. It's about our shared values and our future that's at stake. And I'm really excited to be here to let you all get to know me, Alicia Kozlowski, even better. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Candidate Kozlowski. Candidate Kerr.
Hi, my name is Alan Kerr, and government has no money of its own. We have tolerated a situation where some people and businesses are benefiting at the expense of others using government to make the transfer of wealth. I favor spending and tax reductions because government does not have a revenue problem, it has a spending problem. School boards were created to assist parents in meeting their obligation to educate their children, but the state has sold some of your education rights to the federal government. Schools are to be accountable to the parents, not the government. Since a good economy and good citizenship depend on a good education, it is important that we get this right. I will promote local decision-making, private property rights, the right to keep and bear arms, the right to life, and the right to privacy. I will work to reduce government bureaucracy to a minimum so as to promote free enterprise while appropriately protecting the environment. My decisions will be based on the facts, not pseudoscience. Whether or not you supported the school district's red plan, most people wanted to vote on something this important and expensive. I will work to change state law so that we will be able to vote on major school bond issues. Now a short biography. I'm a Duluth native, graduate of Denfeld High School, class of '76. I graduated from Illinois Institute of Technology with honors in civil engineering. I taught Vacation Bible School. I'm a DNR firearms safety instructor. I've mentored 2 boys. I've participated in the 2001 visioning process, both on the environmental subcommittee and the business subcommittee. I've been a past president of the Duluth Charter Commission, and I'm currently the president of the Arrowhead Multi-Housing Association. Again, my name is Alan Kerr, and I'd like your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Kerr. Candidate Johnston.
Hello, I'm Art Johnston, candidate for Minnesota House 8A. I used to be a Democrat, now a walkaway Democrat. Why? I think we should all be looking at what's happening in our city, in our state. We have runaway inflation, hyperinflation, worst we've had in 50 years. Why? It's because of DFL policies. DFL and their National Democrats have stopped the Keystone Pipeline. They tried to stop Line 3. Not only have they done that, they've also tried to stop mining. Twin Metals now is stopped. They're also trying to stop Polymet. And so I'd like to talk to everybody here that's listening is, how much is the DFL actually supporting you? I don't think they're supporting you at all. Instead, the DFL now is basically clones from the city. They are doing every city policy that's in there. They are being ran by the Sierra Club and the DSA, the socialists in this town. I think people have to know that, and I think we deserve something better than being ran by the Sierra Club and the socialists. Learn more about me. I'm looking forward to this. I have a website called Truth in Duluth, and a little bit of background. I also have to be an engineer as well, and was on the school board for 8 years, which I would be glad to talk more about. And that's one reason I'm a walkaway Democrat now, because the Democrat Party no longer represents people, and instead they go after people. It's time we change.
Thank you, Candidate Johnston. Candidate Forsman.
Well, thank you, Pat. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and PACT-TV for hosting today. It's always great to be with you and to have a chance to answer questions so that voters are more informed on who's running for office. My name is Eric Forsman. I'm proud to serve as the president of the Duluth City Council, and I've been a city councilor at large for the past 4 years. I moved to Duluth with my wife, Jessica. We both grew up on the Iron Range. She was a year older than me, so she came to UMD first, so it was the only school that I applied to. I could have at least applied to St. Scholastica as well, but we've been here ever since. So we've been here for 16 years. We're raising our family in the Kenwood neighborhood. She's a high school counselor at Duluth East, and I lead the economic development and community engagement team for Minnesota Power. I'm running because I have a really strong passion for making sure that working people are taken care of. I was raised by a father who is a steelworker and retired after 30 years with a union pension. One of my earliest memories is being on the picket line with him when he was out on strike with his coworkers fighting for better working conditions and wages. I'm a proud lifelong DFLer, and there's going to be lots of issues we're going to talk about today, but one of the reasons I'm a proud DFLer is because of my party's commitment to democracy. Above any other issue, the thing that keeps me up at night is the erosion of the faith in our electoral process at a national level and making sure that that doesn't happen at a state level. But above that, I'm really passionate about things like making sure that we have investments in public education. My daughter is an elementary school student at Lester Park, and my son will be too when he's old enough to be there. I'm really passionate about affordability of life. We are already struggling with childcare access and affordability, housing access and affordability, as well as healthcare access and affordability. And those things have been exacerbated by some of the recent trends on inflation that I think you could point the finger at both parties for, quite frankly. And then finally, climate change is the other big thing that I think keeps folks up at night, and making sure that we accelerate our efforts to fight that at a state level, and appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Candidate Forsman. Now we'll move on to the questions submitted by the organizing committee. Each of you will have a minute and a half, and we'll begin with candidate Forsman. First one is on environment. What actions can Minnesota legislature take to mitigate future effects of climate change in our district, in particular its effect on water contamination, land erosion, and aging infrastructure?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. This is an issue that I've worked on the city council. If you go down to Park Point, which is not in my district, but it's still part of the city, and as a representative, I think you have a commitment to making sure that we're taking care of the whole community. It is a huge concern about what's happening with erosion of shoreline. There are a lot of different factors for it. I think it's pretty fair to say that climate change is a big part of that. But it's going to take state and federal investment to be able to make sure that our temporary measures that we're doing right now, as far as putting different fill on the beach, which washes away, is solved permanently. And the city can't do that alone. We can't raise property taxes to the degree that it would make sense to do that. So I think state and federal investment is really important. In addition to that, we have things like our lead pipes that we have to get after. And I was just in a roundtable with Senator Tina Smith, who was talking about the infrastructure bill that was passed. And I'm thankful to both Senators Smith and Klobuchar for putting that forward and voting yes on that. And we're looking at getting a significant federal investment to be able to help people take care of their lead service lines. But beyond that, I mean, it was just the 10-year anniversary of the flood. And we saw what happened in our community. And, you know, there's the pictures of the seal obviously washing away and some of those striking visuals that we can all recall. But these storms are only happening more frequently. And that's why it's not only a national concern, but it really is a local concern to give our city the resources they need to be able to deal with those things. And you look at the Lake Walk as another example of something that the city's had to take care of in that regard. So I think this is not only an environmental issue, it's a fiscal issue. For local units of government. I'd be proud to support more state funding for it.
Thank you. Candidate Kerr, same question.
We have a committee process. You know, legislators are members of various subcommittees where things are well hashed out, hopefully. And I basically agree with what Councilor Forsman has said. We want to have good, clean air and clean water. I think everybody wants that, regardless of your party affiliation. But the question is, what's kind of rhetoric and pseudoscience versus reality? And I'd have to tear into that in detail. I'm not maybe, you want to be careful. Yes, you know, the lake belongs to all of us, all the communities around the lake, and it affects Canadians as well as folks on this side of the border. So yes, this is an instance where state and federal funding, because it is a federal waterway besides, you know, we're the largest inland port, my understanding, in the world. So it's a precious resource, and we're going to want to take good care of things. So, yeah.
Thank you. Candidate Hall.
Yes, I agree that it's very important for our state and federal government to adequately fund and invest in our local infrastructure that preserves our water quality, Lake Superior. I agree with many of the issues that have been brought up already. If I were elected, I would one of my priorities would be to sit on a committee that addresses the environment and natural resources and energy. We're talking about having a clean environment, and I agree with Mr. Kerr that we raise our families here. We want a good, healthy environment for our families. I believe one great way of supporting a nice, clean environment is to have an attitude when it comes to energy policy of all of the above energy. That type of strategy that includes renewables, fossil fuels, and we don't have any discussion about nuclear energy at the state capitol. The Democrat Party opposes nuclear energy, and that is one of the most clean and efficient and affordable forms of energy that we really should be considering. So I would love to, as your representative, push for more conversations about that. The technology is amazing. on nuclear energy that shows that it can be done safely.
Thank you, Candidate Hall. Candidate Kozlowski.
Thank you so much for this question. It is a top priority for me because it is a top priority for the people of 8B. I know that because when I'm door knocking, it comes up over and over again, and that's where I'm really proud to have the endorsements of Duluth for Clean Water and the DFL Environmental Caucus. Climate crisis is already affecting everybody in Duluth. We have 100-year storms every 10 years. I know it because I've been working at the city on the Lake Walk and the Brighton Beach restorations and packaging the legislation and the funding requests at the state and federal level to be able to repair and create resiliency in our infrastructure. People want a clean and a green city, and we're working on the city of Duluth with our Visit Duluth, Love It Like We Do. And people really take that to heart and they put it into action. And a big part of that, of what I'm proud of at the city, is having worked on the first ever climate action plan. And we know that we need to ramp down on our carbon emissions, that we need to conserve energy, and that we need to electrify everything. And a big part of this is being able to, how are we promoting justice and healing with an eye on the people who are most impacted: seniors, people with disabilities, people of color. And so at the state level, there's so much we can do that I would do as a state legislator. The Green New Deal, unionized green energy jobs right here in Duluth, 100% Minnesota plan. The big thing is bringing people into positions of power at the Capitol to be able to move these community-led solutions forward. And there are many, and I look forward to working on them.
Thank you, Candidate Kozlowski. Candidate Johnston.
Hi, first of all, I've got to say I'm somewhat disappointed the League of Women Voters. The question was very, very leading, and I'm certainly disappointed with your political position on that. Going back to answer your question anyway, I have done carbon footprint analysis most of my career as an engineer, designed alternative energy systems. In fact, I lived off the grid for 15 years with a wind generator. So I know what I'm talking about when it comes to carbon footprint. And alternative energy is obviously good. Everybody should be looking at alternative energy. I lived on it for 15 years. It was actually a lot of fun. But there is some downsides to it. One is the cost. It is putting up electric rates up everywhere. Now, we have to look at the impact on lower income people, particularly people of color. High electric rates are not helpful for anybody. And I think that's very, very important to look at. We also look at the water levels in the lake. I think you have to look at some analysis on that. Just because we have high water levels, look at any chart about Lake Superior. Water goes up and down all the time. Do we want to do something about carbon or climate change? Obviously. But let's not use bogus ideas like the high water level going on right now, because in 10 years it's going to be record low again.
Thank you, Candidate Johnston. All right, next question, and we'll begin with Candidate Johnston. This one deals with affordable housing. As our population ages, how is the state providing adequate support for senior housing projects locally? Please address both market rate and affordable housing options.
Well, as we all know, Duluth has a housing issue. Anybody that's campaigned going door to door, which you all have, knows that we have a big housing issue here. For affordable housing, that's both good and bad. The question's somewhat misleading, because affordable housing, yeah, you can go out and buy an $80,000 house in Duluth. I don't know, some even for sale for $50,000. You probably don't want to do that because they're not very good houses. Some of these houses actually need a lot of work. So we have to look at, first of all, I think, what is our economy right here. If I recall, the amount of low-income people living in Duluth is one of the highest in the state, because our economy is not good in Duluth. And I think, first of all, we got to get that economy up so people can afford to live in the houses they now live in now, as well as looking for the future.
Thank you, Candidate Johnson. Candidate Forsman.
Thank you for the question. And affordable housing, when I ran for city council in 2019 and now running for the state legislature in 2022, is the number one issue that people talk about when you're door knocking. I absolutely agree with that. And I'm really proud at the city that the council, working with our administration, has invested tens of millions of dollars in federal funds to get after this issue, because it's not just something that families struggle with, which they do. And it's all throughout the age bracket. We talk about senior housing. If there were more places for seniors to go so that they could vacate their home and go to a situation that better fits their lifestyle, that home would then be available for a family to move into as well. And that's called naturally occurring affordable housing. So if I was talking about city council, which I'm not, I talk about, permitting and how we've approved all of the projects that have come before the council over the last 3 years to try to push that forward. But as a state legislator, I've talked with our affordable housing organizations here in town about what they would need. And what they need is somebody at the Capitol who's going to advocate for strong bills on housing that can get through the legislature. Unfortunately, that was something, in addition to pretty much everything else this session, that didn't get done. And so if we don't have that support from the state environment to be able to incentivize these affordable projects, because otherwise what we end up with is just market rate. If we don't do something to correct the market with some of these public incentives, we won't be able to sustain not only family success, but workforce success. Businesses are saying that this is their number one issue too, is that they can't find employees housing to be able to take jobs, and that's why it should be a bipartisan issue.
Thank you, Candidate Forsman. Candidate Kozlowski.
Thank you so much. This is a issue that is near and dear to my heart, personal. I have been working on this issue with the Age-Friendly Duluth, with our affordable housing partners in the county, in the city, in my role as community relations officer, as well as a community member. This is a huge issue we have across from market rate to affordable housing. One of the big things that we know from Age-Friendly Minnesota that they're really moving towards is giving seniors options to either age in place or to increase our senior living options. We also know that many of our seniors are faced with increasingly cost-burdened expenses of living, priced out by property taxes, priced out by inflation and the rising cost of putting food on the table and paying utilities and rent. And so we know that there are a lot of issues that go into actually our senior population experiencing homelessness. And so this issue is multi-pronged. I also agree that we need to incentivize our developers who are developing right here in Duluth, especially as they're using public aid such as TIF, making sure that there are pathways and incentives for them to make more senior affordable housing units, as well as looking at how are we adapting to mobility needs for funds for seniors to stay in their home. We also know that when I hear and I talk to the community members out there, because I'm in it with them every day, whether it's on homelessness or it is on creating more permanent supportive housing and affordable housing, they want somebody who has lived experience and is a people champion. And day one, I'm going to bring my experience with housing insecurity to my role as a state legislator.
Thank you. Candidate Hall.
As I sit here and listen to the responses to this question, and it's a very important question. I remember this isn't the first time I've run for this seat. This is actually the third time. And I've been out in that community a lot, talking to neighbors, and in particular, our seniors. I think about some of the folks I've talked to at their doors. They're in their retirement years. And yes, right now, we costs of living are extremely high. Taxes don't help. Quite often, one of the biggest culprits for our seniors is being taxed out of their homes. That's what I hear when I'm out there speaking with my neighbors. I'm uncomfortable with thinking that government is going to solve all our problems. I've heard these responses year in and year out that government's going to do this, that, and the other. How about government just steps on the side? For example, when it comes to the permitting process, it makes it difficult for us to build those homes. I think there's a market out there. It's been pretty red hot lately that if we were more supportive in allowing housing to build itself, I think that would be very helpful. There are plenty of organizations, the Housing Redevelopment Authority, state agencies that are very supportive in creating affordable housing for our community members. I would be more supportive of trying to keep taxes affordable. Just utility costs are going through the roof. Supporting policies that help keep money in our neighbors' pocketbooks so they can afford their homes.
Thank you. Candidate Kerr.
People have to be willing to pay for what it is they want. So this push for affordable housing is basically asking someone else to subsidize your housing. A lot of this has to do with just an overall attitude and a perspective. So many people, especially on the Democrats, are looking for government to be the solution to problems. But we know that the private sector can do wonderful things if allowed to operate within a free market. In terms of affordable housing, I'll give you a couple examples. I'm a landlord, but I've been a tenant many times in the past, so I understand both sides. But I know of 2 vacant properties in my neighborhood, and I looked at building and renting that out, but I didn't do it. Now, I'm a private sector guy. I wasn't going to get any subsidies doing this, but regulations were so onerous. The inefficiency of dealing with the building department at that time was terrible, and I gave up. I decided this wasn't worth doing, not in Duluth. I've had other landlords I've met. They look at land outside of Duluth, Hermantown, Proctor, and so on, because it's just more friendly to doing housing. So government has to understand that it is actually part of the problem. Every time we turn around, there were new regulations put on property owners. Impervious surface things, parking regulations, it just goes on and on. So the first place I would be looking would be to what can government do to get out of the way and let the free market system work, because that'll bring down prices.
Thank you. Next question, and we'll begin with candidate Kerr.
Mr. Johnston needs to
I'm
answer.
sorry.
No, I think you did.
Did he?
Yeah.
You went
Oh,
first.
good.
Right?
I was first last time.
That's okay.
No, that's okay.
It would be just like
Just
me.
gonna make
No.
sure you got it.
Yeah, appreciate that.
All right. International relations is the topic of the question. Candidate Kerr, first, how do you think our region should respond to refugees from Afghanistan, Ukraine, and other countries, and to asylum seekers from various parts of the world? What do you see as the key issues and ways to address them for refugees and for asylum seekers?
That's always a tough question. But the one thing I would do is want to expect our allies to step up to the plate as well. For example, what happened in Syria, I often wondered why our allies in the region, namely Saudi Arabia, but perhaps Jordan as well, why couldn't they take many of these refugees? They're in a climate and from a culture that is much closer than here. And so whenever you have, very diverse cultures, there can be lots of strife and clash. And it just seems to me that we should expect more from Saudi Arabia and Jordan and other countries in the Middle East to help. So I'm not sure if that answers the question completely, but
Thank you, candidate Kerr.
yeah, thank you.
And candidate Hall.
Well, I think that we are a country that is generous and supportive of its people, and that includes those who choose to come here to make it their home. Of course, I think it's important that we support especially those refugees seeking asylum who have been by our side internationally in our struggles for freedom around the world. Supporting them, they've supported us as well. There should be a place to welcome them if they're under tyranny elsewhere. I agree with Mr. Kerr that it would be ideal if they stayed closer to home where it's more in their culture, but that doesn't mean that we keep our doors shut. I would be very sensitive, though, however, that we do not overwhelm our own communities with we can't just have like a huge number of population coming into our community and overwhelming the system. We have to be able to, number one, support our local citizens and have a conversation about how we can support others who have been with us in that fight for freedom. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Same question, Candidate Johnston.
It's so important when we look at our allies. First, let's talk about Afghanistan. Used to be one of our allies. The pullout from Afghanistan was horrible. I think everybody knows that. It was just disgraceful. We left our interpreters there. We left women there that we knew were going to be preyed upon. And we should be clearly allowing those people to come back. We should have done everything we could to get those people that were our allies, including a lot of women who are now being preyed upon, out of that country. We didn't do a very good job at that. Let's go back to Ukraine. Ukraine is a horrible situation. It is something that, contrary to the local socialist group, America didn't cause that. That was done by Putin. It's causing a genocide. I think for all practical purposes, a genocide, and yes, we should be bringing people there, families there that were displaced because of the horrible atrocities that are going on in Ukraine. Anybody coming in here should be vetted properly. And I think we have to look at what's happening on our southern border right now, what the Democrats are doing. They're letting anybody in at all. Should we be letting people in from Ukraine and Afghanistan? Absolutely. Should we be vetting them? Absolutely. I wish the same thing was going on down on our southern border, because those people are coming in for different reasons, and I think they have to be vetted.
Thank you. Same question, Candidate Forsman.
Thank you. Minnesota has been and needs to continue to be a welcoming place for folks who are fleeing war atrocities and unimaginable tragedies where they're at. And obviously the question was about Afghanistan and the Ukraine. And I was really honored to speak with a member of our 148th Fighter Wing recently who was put on a mission to go to the East Coast and help with some of the Afghani refugee settlement work. And I got to hear her perspective firsthand about what that process was like, how it went, how folks were doing, and really proud that Duluth had a part in helping not only settle folks within Minnesota, but across the country. I think one of the, maybe reasons behind this question is we had a really unfortunate thing that was put forward by the former president, I think late 2017, early 2018, where it was asking county boards to take a vote on whether they would accept refugees. And I took a very strong stance at that point to say that St. Louis County should be a place where we welcome people too. Because if you look at it even broader than a humanitarian issue, we're not seeing population growth in our state to the degree that we need to sustain all sorts of things, including our local workforce. Most of our population growth is going to come through immigration. And so whether it's refugees or immigrants that we need to welcome to Duluth and to our state, it's going to be an important issue for many different reasons across the board in the future.
Thank you. Candidate Kozlowski.
Thank you so much for this question. It is an incredibly important one, values-based in this month that is Immigrant Month, as well as it was just World Refugee Day. And I was sitting here reflecting on, I spent time with our Migrant Justice Committee this week with actually a number of folks who have come to Duluth as refugees from Afghanistan and Russia and Mexico. And these are our relatives, these are our neighbors. And I asked them the question of, what do you need? Tell me about the support that you needed. And they said, people have shown up with big hearts of community care, education, jobs. We've been doing that at the city of Duluth, connecting folks to employers, working with English language learning, and also trying to really be a welcoming community that also doesn't just make people learn English, but that we're also affirming with language justice. And they said, we'd also like to have a little fun and joy, right? So I think in this, there needs to be abundance thinking. Healthcare, Minnesota Care right now excludes folks who are undocumented. We have a new Office of New Americans that is going to be working on the front of supporting immigrants actually create businesses at the highest rates, helping folks to be able to get into higher education, reunify if that's ultimately what's possible. Remaining here, our untapped workforce needs with an unemployment at 2%, this is where our workforce is at. And so if we shift that thinking to abundance and empathy and joy, and I gotta say, as an Indigenous person sitting here, that sure believe that we could all belong to each other and that we all belong here. And that's our values, and that's what Minnesotans really believe in. And that's how I will be working to advance some of this at the state legislature, so that here in Duluth, we welcome everybody.
Thank you. Next question, and we'll begin with candidate Kozlowski. How, in your role as a representative, would you advance legislation to address historical disparities in health and wealth, particularly those affecting the BIPOC communities?
Thank you. This is another deeply personal question, and I'm really grateful for it. Healthcare is one of the number one things that I hear when I'm out on the doors. It is the thing that I've been working on as an Indigenous person, reclaiming and rebuilding our wealth and picking up our lifeways and our culture and affirming who we are as people. There are many, many disparities that go back generations. Go back to federal Indian policy, go back to redlining and racial covenants, why people who live in Duluth live in certain places, and why there's disparities across race, gender, based on your zip code. You could live in one zip code and have a life expectancy that is 11 years shorter than in another zip code, such as my mother, who passed away at the age of 60. That shouldn't happen. We shouldn't expect our people to not make it past 60. And the number one thing that I will be working on as a legislator, among many, would be to really advance universal health care at the state. It is what residents ask for. They're telling me that they're paying $600 employer premiums, that out-of-pocket copays, and not to mention the disparities among LGBTQ, especially trans folks seeking cultural and gender-affirming care. And all of it crosses and really comes back to having universal health care for everybody so that they can get the care that they need and deserve is number one.
Thank you. Candidate Johnson?
As a school board member, I was very well aware of what was going on the disparities on our kids of color. Duluth has one of the lowest graduation rates for kids of color in the state. The state of Minnesota has one of the lowest graduation rates in the country. The Minnesota miracle isn't happening in education. So education is something where we have to do much better at. I tried to get awareness of that when I was on the school board, and it didn't. People were total denial that there was even an issue. So we have to accept that. And I think also, since our schools, and I was on the school board for 8 years, it's been 4 years since I was on it. In the 12 years since I've been tracking this, not one change has been made in the schools. Not one improvement has been made. Not one. So we have failed our community of color, starting right on our school levels. And what are we going to do about that? First of all, we have to look at our education system. We really have to have a choice for our parents. When the schools are failing their kids, which is happening by the community of color, they should have an opportunity, right, to leave that school. Our schools get about $15,000 per student. And I think many parents, particularly parents of color, would love to take that money and bring their kids to a school of their own or homeschool themselves. That's how we fix the problem.
Thank you so much. Candidate Forsman?
Oh, yeah, that's me. This is a really important question, and I appreciate it. It's true. And actually, about the district line for 8A and 8B, it's 7th Avenue East, but it's frequently known that if you're on one side of 6th Avenue East or the other, you've got that difference in life expectancy and quality of life. And we have to change that, and that comes through not only city policy that we've been working on as far as some of the things we've talked about with affordable housing, access to affordable childcare is another really big one, but also I think the intent of the question around building generational wealth gets at things like home ownership and business ownership too. I've been serving on both the Entrepreneur Fund Board and the 1200 Fund Board, and I'm really proud that both organizations have put forward more financing related to BIPOC entrepreneurship and helping folks start businesses, sustain businesses, and grow employment right here in our community. We have many BIPOC-owned businesses that we can be proud of, and that we're, many of them were out supporting their cause at Juneteenth and at other events recently. But beyond that, there's been a number of bills that have come forward from the House DFL and have passed over the last couple of sessions that just have no support on the other side of the aisle when you get to the Senate. From renters credits to boosting child care tax credits for all income levels and making sure that our folks who need it the most are getting it, capping out-of-pocket costs on prescriptions. These are all things that historically have impacted folks who are underrepresented more than the dominant culture, and any way I can be a bridge builder to try to get things done, I'll do that.
Thank you. Candidate Kerr, same question.
Yes, well, this is similar to what I said before. You have to be willing to pay for what it is you want, and that applies in healthcare as much as housing or anything else. The real answer is, one, these communities need to truly melt. Many of them don't. We're supposed to be a melting pot, but we don't see that going on so much. I lived for 4 years in Los Angeles, and I saw, the people from south of the border protesting. They're not willing. They're antagonistic. You wonder why they're here if it's so bad. The thing with healthcare and other issues, Democrats seem to want to see it in terms of identity politics. And I'm glad to say that as a Republican, we tend not to do that. Sometimes we do, but I think that's a mistake. Education is a real important issue when it comes to everything, because it affects how much income you have, which then can affect your health and so on. So we have to be willing to pay for what it is we want, and a good education is where the focus needs to be.
Thank you. Same question, Candidate Hall.
Yes, as I listen to the answers here, something that comes to my mind is we're talking about the health and well-being of our citizens here in Duluth. I think one key word that I can't help but think about all the time, especially in the last couple of years, is government mandates. And I think we really need, at the legislature, a hard, strict conversation about and analyzing these mandates and how they affect us here in Duluth. Mandates when it comes to healthcare, that causes the cost of healthcare to increase, as well as locking down our businesses. That's really harmed our small businesses, where we do not have opportunities as we used to for our citizens of Duluth. And some of these decisions that have been made in the last couple of years affect those at the lower income levels in our minority communities even more so, which is sad. And we need to have a conversation about school choice and allowing our children to have the best educational opportunities possible and let them choose where that might be. I would be supportive of that. And one other thing is when we're talking about health and well-being, it's public safety. We need to be supporting our police and getting them back in our community and keeping all of us safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, and we'll begin with Candidate Hall.
Okay.
What changes, if any, do you support to the laws on gun ownership and use?
Well, as I mentioned, I've been running for this seat a couple of times, and that conversation always comes up. And it's as we all know, it's a heated conversation about how we're going to propose gun control. And I'm thinking, in the meantime, what's really pressing and important to me, being a mother of 5, is gun violence in our schools. what can we do to keep our kids safe in schools? While the federal government is working on addressing our Second Amendment rights, which I'm a proponent of our Second Amendment and our right to defend ourselves, especially being a woman and a mother of 3 daughters, I think it's really important that that right is not taken away. But in the meantime, I would like to see policies that support protecting our kids in school, whether that be volunteer, retired military, police that are undercover, walking around as marshals. We do this on our airlines where we have undercover marshals that are carrying, and they're able to protect our kids in those buildings. That the building should be secured more so. And I just think that's one priority that I could work on right now that would help, especially diminish gun violence in our schools. Our kids deserve it.
Thank you. Candidate Forsman.
Every society, every modern country, or country of privilege, has issues with mental health. It's not it. That's not why we have an epidemic of gun violence in this community. It is the guns. And as a state legislator, the 3 things I would work on immediately are red flag laws to keep guns out of the hands of folks who are a danger to themselves and others, enhanced background checks, which have support of over 80% of Americans, and prohibitions on assault rifles. Now, that said, if the Senate continues to be Republican-held, none of those things will happen. So how do we protect our children? And I have a daughter who had to go through a wild animal training in case, that's what they call lockdown training in kindergarten. I have a wife who's the first, line of defense in a high school. It's very personal. There's one thing we could do, and I love that it's a local control thing. So in the 1980s, the state legislature told cities they can't do anything on guns. And so for my friends who are in favor of local control, that would be one policy I would propose next year as a state legislator, to let cities have that conversation for themselves. Because we have gun shows here in town, we could pass some things here in Duluth if we wanted to do that. And I think that cities across Minnesota should have the option to explore that. It's insanity. We have an epidemic that we have to get after. I spoke at 2 vigils for gun violence a month apart in Duluth, and there were 67 mass shootings between those 2 vigils. We have to do something.
Thank you. Candidate Johnston.
It's an issue, but there's also issues, for example, the Second Amendment to the Constitution. That is something that we just can't kick out. It's done. So gun violence is something which does depend on mental health issues and drugs. I think we all know, even in Duluth here, the fentanyl issues here in Duluth are, it's an epidemic. And to say that there's no mental health issues now, no more than any other country, is completely wrong. We have a lot of issues, and we have to deal with those issues. And say that somebody that goes out and shoots up a schoolroom is somehow sane is okay. That's just not right. Also, the Democrats, they've been really pushing this right now because of the horrible thing that happened down in Texas. Well, what happened about the last 2 summers? Nobody cared about the gun violence back then. Nobody cared about our cities being turned down. And I think we have to look at, as a society, we have to look at something. I will look at that, the hate emulating from Washington and from our political parties, both political parties. The political party in power now are the Democrats and the DFL. And the hate, as we see on TV every night, the political hate, really has to stop, because that goes over and infiltrates everywhere, including our children, including our mentally ill and drug-based people. We have to stop the hate.
Thank you. Candidate Kerr.
Thank you. This is an issue I've studied since 1982. I have never discovered a gun control mechanism that's ever worked to reduce violent crime. It's never happened. Recently, I looked at Australia's statistics. In 1996, there were over 600,000 long arms turned into the government and destroyed. but they've had mass shootings since. So it doesn't work. I also was intrigued by looking at what the weapon used in the event. I was surprised to find out that, well, automobiles have been used, stabbings, but especially arson struck out. There were at least 3 instances relatively recently where the death toll was in double digits due to arson. And also a few years ago, when I looked at statistics here in the United States, the worst mass murder, mass killing event was done by arson. So are we going to regulate gasoline the way we want to or sometimes think that we ought to with firearms? No, that won't work. It is a moral issue when you peel it all back. It is absolutely not the guns, because guns can't think or do anything on their own. It's ridiculous, and as long as we continue to focus on the guns, we're going to continue to get this wrong. My wife was an early childhood family education teacher, so she taught pre-K, and for years she wanted to carry in the school. But of course the regulations don't allow it. But that's one thing that we can do. When you need defense, you need it now. You need it right now, not 74 minutes later or whatever. We need it within seconds. So let's look at allowing school staff to be armed.
Thank you. Candidate Kozlowski.
Thank you for this question. I know it's on the hearts and minds, and it's in our bodies of Duluthians and across people across our country. As a survivor of violence in many forms, it's not lost on me that also as a member of the LGBTQ community, I look back at the Pulse nightclub shooting that targeted our community. Gun violence has targeted the Black community in New York and grocery stores, our Asian community, kids in Texas, and families right here in Duluth. In fact, today, Chief Tuskin is holding a press conference on the rise of gun violence in our community. This is something that I see as the role of a state legislator is the number one is to protect the health and safety and the well-being of our people. And I fully support common sense gun laws and legislation like expanding universal background checks that's in the House and Senate, the Protect the Kids bill at the federal level. I also absolutely support red flag laws and closing the loop for folks who are at risk, such as those who have histories of domestic violence. Also, we need to empower our families and our law enforcement to be able to take action on warning signs. Over 84% of Minnesotans overwhelmingly support background checks and things like 3 to 7 day waiting periods. I was talking with a clinical social worker on the doors over the weekend, and she said that is something that would absolutely benefit many of the folks that she's working with in preventing suicides as well. So I'm ready to hit the ground running and working with groups like Brady, Moms Demand Action, and the colleagues at the legislature, because this should have been taken action on yesterday. As a mom, I have an 8-year-old in the school as well. I believe as moms, and when we're united, we're unstoppable.
Thank you. Last question. This is having to deal with elections. What measures do you support to improve free and fair elections so that everyone eligible participates, every vote is counted without undue barriers, and everyone's voice is heard? And we'll begin with candidate Kozlowski.
Thank you so much. I was hoping somebody would ask this question. It's really important, and I was reflecting on as I was coming to this forum that 60 years ago, my grandmother, a Native American, couldn't even vote in every state in the country. And we think about the enduring legacy of fighting for the right to vote for women, for Black and Brown communities. And I know that we all care about democracy as we are looking at the trials and hearings that happen, that we can't look away, that we must continue to protect and expand our democracy and election integrity. It's something I've been working on at the city of Duluth for the last 2 years, and working to create fair and transparent and accessible elections, and as well as to expand civic engagement, especially for folks like me who have been excluded from these spaces. So Duluth in Minnesota, we have some of the highest turnouts and voter engagement rates. I know it because I've been working with the ethnic councils of the state already, like Council on Latino Affairs and the Census Committee, to make sure that we have folks who are representative so that we are counted on the map in redistricting, and that's why I support things like independent redistricting commissions, reinstating voter rights for felons, automatic opt-in for registered voters. Other states are also doing automatic opt-in for absentee ballots, as well as making sure that we are expanding against voter intimidation and any interference and deceptive tactics. So I really believe that, again, we have to protect the power of the people and put the hands in the people's ability to have and take part in our democracy.
Thank you. Candidate Kerr?
Yes. Well, I've been a election judge probably at least 35 times here in the city of Duluth. And I've seen a few things over the years that send up the red flag. There is one instance of actual fraud that I'm aware of. But one thing I thought would be interesting, and we have, about 34 precincts in Duluth. If you would take, say, 3, and for those of you who remember the 60s and the draft, how they had a drum, and they would turn the drum around, and then you'd have a publicized drawing. We could do that as far as let's say we draw 3, so they're randomly chosen 3 precincts in the city of Duluth, and they would be automatically recounted. I think that would add some transparency and some trust in the process, and it should be televised, perhaps on PACT-TV. So we can discuss some of these things. I'm very willing to hear opportunities, suggested by others, where we can make sure that we have good, clean elections. That is obviously a high priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Hall?
Yes, voting security, it's a huge priority. It's very important. Our right to vote is very integral to our voice here in this country. I also was active in working in the polls as a poll watcher, and even volunteered for the Kids Vote to encourage young people to get out the vote. What a great way to start is with our kids. And yes, we've come a long ways in having the opportunity to vote in this country. Again, having the highest voter turnout here in Duluth says something about that. As your legislator, I would support ideas, for example, policies that would strengthen the chain of custody when it comes to managing our ballots after Election Day, making sure that's sound and secure, that those ballots are safe, and support a process of cleaning up our voter rolls to make sure that only those who are legally eligible for voting are on those rolls, and I think that would be helpful. And I also believe that it's important to have a legal ID when going to vote. And for those where it may be a barrier, if it comes to cost, the state of Minnesota can provide a voting ID for those who may need some assistance in that. So I don't believe that a voter ID requirement would be a barrier to our freedom to vote. And I would also support opportunities to get more election judges at our polling stations.
Thank you. Candidate Johnston?
Both sides of the political spectrum have a lot of distrust in our voting system, and that has to be addressed. I've heard people talk about how high people vote, the percentage. Well, maybe you better rethink that. In the last school board city council election, 22% of the eligible voters voted. 22%. That doesn't sound too good to me, so all the stuff that we've been doing has failed completely. What should we do? First of all, we should put all elections, for example, school boards and city council, up on years where all the other people are elected. We get a higher percentage of people voting. And it's very important that people vote. And 22% shows a failure. A couple other things that we should also look at is that I think it's important that voting be done on one day. This is democracy. We have debates. This is what we're doing here. We're debating the issues. And if you start voting a month ahead of time, which is the way it works right now, and there isn't any forums going on, everybody hears this late, that's really taking away the whole point of democracy, which is having people having a choice right up to the last minute. Also, we have to have secret ballots. Secret ballots have been the key of democracy for forever. And right now we don't have. The mail-in ballots are no longer secret ballots. And what's happening on those ballots at home? Who's telling who to vote for? We need to get secret ballots back again. We have to have one-day voting. We have to get all the elections on one city council and school board on same time that every other election is.
Thank you. Candidate Forsman.
Thank you. I mentioned in my opening comments that democracy is the issue that keeps me up at night, and it's mostly a national thing. And we're seeing, as candidate Kozlowski mentioned, so these hearings playing out at a national level. We're really lucky in the state of Minnesota to have Steve Simon as our Secretary of State, who's put forward a number of different proposals that helped us have those high turnout numbers even during a pandemic. And some of the things that came forward out of that, with early voting, with easier absentee voting, making it easier for folks to vote, is the key to making sure that we have folks engaged in our democracy. And there's no proof of widespread fraud has been touted in the media and all of that. And I'm really proud to live in a state that thinks like that. Also a state that rejected voter ID not too long ago. But one of the things you can do as an elected official, besides pass good policy, which I'm in favor of all that, is use your voice. And when I was dismayed when Congressman Stauber signed on to that Texas lawsuit after the 2020 presidential election, because I don't agree with Congressman Stauber on everything, but I didn't think he would go to that level. And so I wrote the public response and worked with 2 of our county commissioners and our mayor to co-sign that, to hold him accountable. And I was really proud of that. It was not an easy moment. I don't typically try to, call people out by name, but that was an instance where it deserved it, because he's our representative, and as these things play out at a national level, he needs to hear that Duluthians believe in fair and free elections and not undermining the core of our democracy with misinformation.
Thank you. Now we'll move to the closing statements. 2 minutes, if you will. We'll begin with candidate Forsman.
Thank you again for having us today. This is always interesting to learn from perspectives and hear each other and exchange our ideas. I'm really honored to have served as your Duluth City Councilor for the last 4 years and have worked tirelessly to try to earn your trust. I have diverse experiences within the public sector, the private sector, and also serving in office. And I believe that my experience and track record working collaboratively to try to bring forward policy solutions, it would be a net asset for our state legislature. We had a $9 billion surplus in the 2022 legislative session, and we couldn't reach a deal. They came up with some parameters, but when push came to shove, the 2 parties could not get it done. And I think one of the things that would be helpful for both parties, quite frankly, is to have more folks who have served in local elected office, school board, city council, etc., stepping into those roles. Because as a city councilor, I don't get a say in whether I pass a budget or not. We must pass a budget. I don't get a say in whether I answer emails from my constituents on any given topic, because they will hold me accountable if I don't. And as we think about all of the issues that are important to our state, I think having someone who has relationships on both sides of the aisle, certainly I agree with my friends on the Democratic side more often, but I have relationships in St. Paul already. I know what that job is. I have a realistic view of what I can do to try to make progress. I'm going to take the track record that I've proven as a city councilor, and I'm going to work tirelessly for all people of my district when I get down to St. Paul, and I would love your vote on August 9th. In support of me are all the labor organizations, and I'm really honored to have working people behind my campaign.
Thank you. Candidate Kerr.
Yes, I ran for this office back in 2008 as well, and at that time my Democratic opponent, his big thing was to get state money to fund the Amsoil Arena for the sake of the UMD hockey team. But I thought it was not only inappropriate, because hockey's a recreational thing, it's enjoyment, that's not an area where government should go, but also we at that time were dealing with severe sewer overflow issues, and that's an environmental issue, and that is something I felt the it definitely should be helping us with dealing with. It was mentioned earlier about background checks. Well, I know of a study that where it came out that background checks don't work. They can actually increase violent crime rates. And plus, we know those lists are not perfect. I could give you examples if you want on that. But red flag laws, think about what you're talking about. Instead of being innocent until proven guilty, you are now guilty until proven innocent with a red flag law. You don't have a chance to challenge your accuser. It's done by a secret court that you're not even aware of. It's not the way to go. It is a moral issue. Let's get our eyes off the guns. Let's see, this country is supposed to be a melting pot, but all too often nowadays it doesn't seem like that's why so many of these immigrants are here. I think there should be a loyalty test to be a citizen. I'm running out of time, but my name is Alan Kerr, and I'd appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Kozlowski.
Thank you again for the opportunity to inform and to empower the people of Duluth in making this really big decision as you head to the voting polls. Again, my name is Alicia Kozlowski, and I'm bringing 14 years of experience, educational background with an MBA in the public and private sectors, in business development, working with over 500 North End businesses, in higher education, shifting systems to serve students, and now at the City of Duluth, where I work inside and out to make our government transparent and responsive to the people. As a state legislator, what I'm bringing is a strengths-based approach to co-govern with the people of Duluth. And so whether it's been on housing and creating pathways to home ownership, or economic justice, we just launched a North End Business Directory and supporting entrepreneurs, women, veterans, people of color with a summit. We have been working on the City Equity Action Plan that I founded, working to make our employers places that attract and retain diverse folks. Education equity and advancing the Teacher of Color bill to make sure curriculum and educators are reflective of our community. Suffice it to say, I'm a survivor and I'm here thriving. And so if you care about economic development that pulls everybody forward, I have your back. If you believe LGBTQ rights, abortion rights, healthcare and housing are human rights, I have your back. And if you believe that together we can create regenerative systems that take care and allow all of us to thrive, I have your back. Again, I'm Alicia Kozlowski, and thank you for this opportunity. And I do ask for your vote in the primary election on August 9th.
Thank you. Candidate Johnston.
It's been fun listening to everything as the people on the DFL side talk a good line, and that we're going to do this and everything will be fixed. Let's look at the reality of what's happened under the DFL. Hyperinflation is going on right now. We all know that. Lumber prices are through the ceiling. Anybody's done any kind of building. Obviously, buying gas at the pump is through the ceiling. We all know that the DFL talks a good line, but they do everything they can to go against working people. We need to have the Keystone Pipeline opened up. We need to have it bringing into Superior, our refinery here. We need to obviously have Twin Metals opened up, which is helping out everybody, our industry, our country, everything that we own depends on metals. Let's talk about our schools. Our schools, there's no question our schools in Duluth are failing, particularly kids of color. We have to have a choice for that. Parents have to have an option. Do they want to go someplace else? Do they want to go to a place that will actually educate their children rather than talk a bunch of virtue signaling? Virtue signaling doesn't do it. It failed. We look at who's running our DFL, the actual representatives right now. We have a bunch of clones that are cloning what's happening in Minneapolis. Duluth is our town. We want to people that represent Duluth, not Minneapolis, Sierra Club, and the socialists.
Thank you. Candidate Hall.
Well, I just want to thank you once again, the League of Women Voters, for the opportunity to have this debate today. I wish we had more time to really delve into the issues, but it was good to just give a little bit of background on all of us running here. Again, my name is Becky Hall. running for 8B legislative seat, my third time running. And again, I just want to say, after decades of a Democratic party stronghold here in Duluth, look what we have. Gas prices through the roof, skyrocketing inflation, our retirement savings disappearing right before our eyes, energy prices hitting an all-time high, empty shelves at the grocery stores, shuttered small businesses, increased crime, and a mental health crisis that's harming our kids. You know, Duluth deserves so much more than what the Democrat Party can offer us right now. Their policies are actually harming our families and our community. So it's time to turn this ship around. I think we can do things, as Mr. Johnson had mentioned, to address our energy policy. There's a way to protect our environment with clean energy that includes renewables, nuclear, support our Line 3 Enbridge. All those things make energy affordable for our families here in Duluth. Supporting mining and our local businesses, those create great jobs, great paying jobs for our families here in Duluth. Supporting our schools to make sure that they're safe. And that $9 billion surplus that is being debated at the legislature, how about we take a little bit of that, put it in a rainy day fund for future government emergencies, and give the rest back to Minnesotans, to us Duluthians, put it back in our pockets. We're the ones who gave it to the legislature in the first place. That would be a good start in turning this ship around and helping Duluth families by having a legislative leader that supports their efforts to raise their families. And I ask for your support in November. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes the candidate forum for State Representative Districts 8A and 8B. It's our purpose in sponsoring meetings such as this to provide you with an opportunity to hear candidates discuss the issues that are important to you. There's never enough time to cover all of the issues in a limited time. If your questions weren't addressed, you can feel free to contact the candidates directly. We hope the program has helped you learn more about the candidates and issues so that you can make an informed choices at the polls on Tuesday, August 9th. Thanks to the candidates, PACT-TV, and viewers for making this event possible. Thank you for coming, candidates, and everyone. Remember to vote for the candidates of your choice. PACT-TV will carry the forum and others and check their listings for a schedule of times. Thank you.